So please give a round of applause to Derick.
Hello. All right. I hope you've all prayed to the demo gods, because there will be lots of demos here. And I did just run through it, and obviously nothing worked, because you know how it goes. All right. Good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed lunch. Mike already mentioned that, so I don't have to. I'm Derick. I live in London. I like maps, beer, and whiskey. That's for some other time. So let me get straight in with this. How many of you have let me start with asking you questions first. How many of you are using Xdebug? Okay, I should have asked that the other way around. It's about 60-40 if I have to guess. Who of you also uses Vardom debugging? That's fine. See, it's fine once in a while. Most of you probably have heard of PHP info, right? It gives you all the information about PHP. It's really useful for debugging what's going on with PHP itself. How many of you have heard of Xdebug info? I'm already getting applause. I just started. How's that working? So Xdebug info is the same as PHP info, but then just for Xdebug, and it tells you a lot of interesting things. Okay, I will be switching back and forth through my demos, and we'll see how that goes. Okay. So this says this is a lie. I'm not sure why it says 341. That explains a lot. No, not that too big. All right, so just like with PHP info, this tells you all the things that are going on with Xdebug. It tells you which things are enabled. You hopefully want to have the debug helpers on the step debugger. That's my standard things. I tend not to have the profile on at the same time as the debugger, because that makes no sense whatsoever. It gives you a bit of system information. That is useful for me if people run into a problem, because sometimes there's something going on with the debugger itself and you have to debug the debugger. And it tells you a few other things. But probably one of the more interesting things is this diagnostics log. Because it will tell you everything that Xdebug tried to do but couldn't do. Like in this case, it's like I couldn't connect to my debugging client. This is useful because now you know that the debugger isn't working, right? And it also has, if you click on these, I won't do that here because I don't think I'm on the Wi-Fi, it will open up the documentation. It will tell you what the possible cause is, what you can do about it, and so on. So it is a much quicker way of trying to figure out what is actually going wrong. And also, if the debugger is active, it will tell you that too. You get a bunch of the PHP configuration, but only the thing that depends on PHP. And you get the INI settings, but there have been changed a little bit. It does a bit more. Let me try to find what it is. Hopefully it doesn't do that when I look for it. But yeah, it shows you all the things in here as well that have been changed. Now, this is nothing particularly groundbreaking. But Xdebug info can also do a few other things. Now, on my other screen, I have here, that's probably not readable in the back, is it? Make it bigger. What is the make it bigger? Yes? No? Did I do that right? There we go. So here I have my PHP info file, right? So and I put in Xdebug info in here, which is useful. Now, shall I try to debug this, or shall we show the other things? Let's show the others first. So we have Xdebug info mode. If I run that, keep my fingers crossed, I'll get an exception as well. We'll get back to the exception in a moment. It will tell you which modes are enabled. No, not particularly useful for you, but if you're writing any tools that make use of Xdebug, like PHP Unit, it can query these things to figure out what's actually turned on. And that's sometimes if you try to do code coverage, for example, with PHP Unit, it will tell you code coverage is not enabled. That's because it looked at these settings here. It's kind of useful. Now let's get to the exception then. So exceptions are things that happen, and Xdebug will show you these orange messages in case you don't have an exception handle or a try-catch around it. But do you know that you can actually break on exceptions in Xdebug? It'll let you do that. All right, so let me get to the debugger. I will set a breakpoint here, because why wouldn't I? And I'll go to listen mode. Hopefully I've turned off PHP Storm. Give me 1 second. Yeah. Because if you try to listen with two IDs at the same time, it's not working. And we have to debug this. So I'll go to listen mode here. It's now turned orange in the bottom. In the back, you probably can't see that, but it basically says it's listening. We request the script again. And then if we have our look, it should... No, what did I click now? Oh yeah, I was wondering why nothing is happening because it is waiting in the ID, but this is not the file that I was editing just now, was I? This is a different file. Now the reason for this is that I was baffled the first time I saw this, obviously, because what I'm doing is my examples are running in the Docker container, and it's looking for the file var www.html info.php. But I also had that file on my local file system, which looks like this instead of the other info file, which is rather annoying. This is where you get your path mapping set up, right? And if you don't have your path mapping set up, which you often have to do either in your IDE, either VS Code, you have some configuration block for that, or I can actually probably show you that, or in the PHP Stormway, there's like a user interface for that. So where did that go? So obviously, I have commented this out right now to make this fail, because that was the plan here. That was the practice plan. So in order to make it work, you can of course do this. Save it, stop, listen, and then request the script again. And then of course now it stops on the right line. I mean, that's what path mappings do. But you having to do this every time is kind of annoying. Because you need to think about setting the configuration. You can't really commit this. Well, with VS Code, at least you get to commit this file into your repository, but in PHP Storm you can't do that. This configuration is some weird XML formatty kind of thing that I can never remember. So this is annoying. So let me now turn this off again. Let me break it again, in other words. Continue running the rest of my... Yeah, I know my exception. We go back to the exception in a moment. Get my error again. So what I've now done in Xdebug 3.5 is that there's another way of making your path mappings. So if you go into the directory here, there should be a .xdebug. Where did I... It was just there. Oh, it's right there, never mind. Can't read. And in there I have a file that says var www equals /, which is the root of my project in this case. So if I save this now, and I've removed the path mapping from VS Code itself now, I stop this, I put it back in listen mode, and request this page. Is it still? Sorry, I didn't see what was going on. Request a page. Okay, it's waiting for localhost again. And it hasn't done so yet, because demos never work like this. No worries, I have another one of this coming up in a moment. What should have happened is, because I've now made this path mapping in with Xdebug, it should have done this calculation for you automatically. So you can now make these path mappings in Xdebug, which you can commit to your repository, so that you can share that with everybody else. Now, it would have been nice if that would have worked in the demo. So this deploy map, basically how this works, everything in the .xdebug directory in your main project root, you get to map directories to directories, or you can map files to files, or you can map lines to lines. Now the lines to lines, I don't have a demo up, but I have something to show you where else this is useful in a moment. But now let me turn this back on here. And then let's have a look at the exception that I just showed you, because I promised that. Okay, sorry. Run this through. Yeah, I know.
Is it possible that that doesn't pick up because there is an active mapping path in the JSON?
I don't know right now, and I don't have the time to debug it. All right, so let me do this again. Sorry, I thought I just fixed this. Why did it not do the job? Maybe I forgot to relaunch it. There we go. Relaunch it, and we can now get finally to the exception. So I'm now here at the right file. That's not so interesting. Let me step over this. And now we jump into the exception, right? Or I can just run the script and see what happens. And I said, well, VS Code now says an exception has occurred, but it's also interesting that there's now an extra stage on the top here. So anytime you get an exception, you get to break for these exceptions, which I've done here by turning on exception debugging. And that means that you get to inspect the information in the exception automatically without you having to look into this immediately. So this extra stage between your locals, which is where your normal variables in, I have none of those, or your super globals, of which I have plenty of. There's now a separate stage called exception that shows you the information about the exception. So this is a new thing that is recent. I think this is kind of a little useful addition. Now, these extra states that I have here, you can do other things with as well. So let me stop this script and open up the other one that I have, which is pipes. Now, PHP 8.4 has pipes in this kind of syntax. But if you have a syntax like this, how can you figure out what is the variable information that goes through the pipeline? Now, traditionally, how you would do this, if you have this done with function calls, what you do is assign it to a variable, then pass that variable into the next function, right? Which is basically what pipes are in PHP. But there's no way to have this temporary variable for you to inspect. So what Xdebug has in 3.5 is a way of doing that as well. So let me go back here. Instead of info, I want pipes. Apparently, I run this with PHP 8.4, which explains a lot. Let me see if I can fix that.
It was 8.2, I guess.
I just walked through this. This is embarrassing. No worries, I'll make it work. No, it does work. We don't need this. We don't need this. Docker's just annoying anyway, isn't it? So we use PHP 8.5 for sure. And I will use to make sure that I actually have Xdebug loaded. I have it loaded so badly it's loaded twice, but that's okay. And we start PHP -s. Which one did I use here? Oh wait, let's try it again. That is me not knowing how to use PHP. There we go. There we go. Hello world. Not particularly the most useful thing, but it works. Okay. So let me go back to VS Code, put it in listen mode again. Fingers crossed. Load this page again. Did it stop? Didn't stop because there's no breakpoints. I have no idea what's going on today. I don't know. Whenever, it helps if I go to the right directory, isn't it? There we go. Load the file. It did change something. That's always good news, isn't it? All right, so let me put that breakpoint once more. Reload. I don't know what's going on. This is terrible, isn't it? Okay, so now, clearly debugging is really hard. So maybe we should figure out why. And I actually can show you some other things that might help you trying to do things as well. So I have started my PHP server here, right? So how would I debug this? Because let's turn this into something useful. I will make a log file. So set Xdebug log equals temp equals, and by typing this, I now know what's going wrong. So that's okay. Make a log file. Try it again. Reload. Why is it not connecting? Actually, I did prepare that. We put Xdebug info in there, so reload that. Oh, go on. Okay, let's see what's going on here. So the development helpers are disabled because I didn't enable this. You can see that the step debugger is enabled, so that's good news. And what's going on here? Like nothing wrong is going in here whatsoever. It even says it's connected to the debugger. So that's good news. But why doesn't it stop? All the breakpoints. I'll try this again. Again, it says it's connected. It keeps removing my breakpoints, you see that? It's very strange. Anyway, let's open the log file and see what's going on. Yeah, open already. So, lots of data in here. Is this the file that I just created? Actually, let me try that again because otherwise I got confused. File, Vim, there we go. It's empty.
Finance.org.
Oh yeah, that helps if I type it correctly. Thank you. Now I get lots of more useful information. All right, so let me go to the bottom. Let's see what's going on here. I open the last one that starts here, right? So my request is here. It comes in, it reads a few things. It says found some path mapping rules. Fine, we did create those. It says it's activating. That's fine. It says breakpoints. It says mapping to replace things, but I'm not using Fluent. I'm using the pipes, right? So I'm setting a breakpoint on pipes here. And it says it couldn't map the location for our pipes.php, which makes sense because that's not the one I'm running. So the question is here is that I have this file that I probably should not have because I'm not running it in the container anymore. Yeah, so let's start again. One more time. Still not. Okay, I have to give up on this. This is terrible. Scanning for the files, path mappings. Okay, I don't know what's going on. So, that was the problem, because now I can see it's waiting. Anyway, so finally made this work. Sorry, just a double path mapping. Apparently that does not work. Right, so we skipped through this here, and this is like normal debugging, right? And now we get to the results. So we know what's going to go into the pipe, which is our input, which is the hello world, how are you? So I skip into this, and then it actually stops halfway. It doesn't do anything here yet because nothing really has happened. So let me skip into this once more. It now shows the X hello world. And now it comes out of this and it shows this return value. So it shows the return value 5, which is the result that comes back out of explode. So that is kind of nice to see because now you can see all the variables in there. So this return value debugging will show you all the return values that come back from function calls. That also works for closures. So now it's stopped again on the same line because it's the result of this closure. So you get to inspect all the returns that are coming through here. So these intermediate values, these are the ones that are coming out of the pipe. So you have the results that comes back out of the function results. And then the intermediate value are the values that are going through the pipes to all the next stages. Which makes debugging this kind of things a whole lot easier than it used to be. Now, obviously, this only makes sense if you're using PHP 8.4. How many of you are using that in production yet? It's like almost more than I thought. That's excellent news, excellent. And so on. And I think this is actually a really useful thing to have. Now, let me skip forwards because I've had enough of these pipes. Okay, I've done that, sorry, my demos, I've done the exceptions. All right, so the next thing is that these path mappings, although I make them, you can also use them to skip through things. So instead of mapping file to file, what you can do is say skip, and then it skips this directory. Where do you think this is useful? Anyone wants to guess?
Composer autoload.
Composer autoload, that's a good one, or your vendor folder, right? Now, I shall demo this too. That I also just tried that. is I have the code for Xdebug's own website. Where's my open? For some reason, PHP Storm has put this annoying bar, and I can't get it out. Why is it doing that? No, I don't know why it does that. I can't see what's there. This is a bug, isn't it? No. Okay, I might have to drop out of this presentation mode for a moment. But then it's so small. Can we make it bigger? No, it doesn't do that. Okay, I'll go back and forth. It's fine. Come on. And presentation mode. There we go. All right, so the Xdebug website is ridiculously simple. I basically have a match against my URLs, and then it does things, right? But I still use lots of other things in there. And in this case, I have some controllers, and controllers are the files, or the classes are loaded through auto loading, as you would expect. Just making sure I've turned the debug off there. Yes, I turn it on here. It's turning on here now. And I go in my browser to the Xdebug website. Everybody fingers crossed. Oh yeah, that works. So it says it's waiting for localhost now, so that's a good sign. We skip here, and it indeed stops in this line on my breakpoint. That's what you expect, right? So let me jump into this. So what I want to see, of course, is the function that I've created myself. Right? I want to jump into the render function. Or probably it goes into the index function of the controller first. So I do that. And exactly that's what it does. Because I've already told it to skip the vendor directories. So let me see how I did that. Show you how I did that. Open this file. Yeah, so there's one thing here. PHP Storm thinks this is an auto-generated file. It isn't. I have written this myself. But by making this line, this skip line here, it basically told Xdebug to ignore this whole vendor line and basically skip everything where the paths match with Xdebug vendor, which is pretty useful. Now, if I remove that, so I can command it out, but I can't remember which character to use for that. Then, of course, when I do this again, jump to PHP Storm, it stops at a breakpoint. If I now jump in there, it goes to my autoloader. So by being able to turn it off, you spend quite a lot of things. Now, at the moment, you've seen that I've done this for the whole vendor folder, but you can also do this for specific files, or if you want, even for specific lines. Now, I don't want to demo the lines here, but what these mapping files can do is I have it as a file now, sorry, directory now. If I want to do the files, it's not the right file name, I know that well, you get to use the file name here, but if you want to do it for line ranges, you can also do that. Now these line ranges can also map to other files with other line ranges. So there's a few tools out there that generate class files from class files that you're editing. So the people that work on the code edit a file in a specific directory, but what is actually being run is that same file, slightly changed, put in a different directory. They use a thing called AOP, so what is it called? I can't remember. Aspect-oriented program, that's the one, to augment their files. And in order to do that, to debug that now, was always really annoying because the files that were being run was never the files that you're being editing. So if you set a breakpoint in the files that you're editing, it would never stop on the breakpoint, which is rather annoying. Now, where else is this useful? It's also useful for templates. So you have a template that is being written in, say, Twig, for example. If you want to step to the logic in the Twig template, you have what Xdebug will do is go through the code that is actually being run, right? Which is then some generated PHP code. Now, I know some editors have some ideas that have some mechanism for correlating these, but with the native path mapping here, it also allows template engines like Twig or like Blade or anything else that you come up with can also generate these map files so that Xdebug will translate the PHP code that is being run to the lines in the template where this code originated from. So which means you can then step through your templates like you're stepping through normal code. Now this already works with VS Code. It doesn't work with PHP Storm yet because they don't allow breakpoints being set in non-code files. I have an outstanding issue for them. It says it's fixed, but it's only going to be in the next EAP release, the number 2, which isn't out yet. So I was hoping to demo that, but I can't because it's not there yet. So sometimes the IDEs are slightly lagging. At the moment, the VS Code plugin is a bit further ahead with supporting some of Xdebug's newest features because they are not a big company. All good? Okay, fair. All right, so there's one other thing that I don't like about these files now, because every time you have, if you want to map other lines, for example, you want to match 72 to 73, because if you have a template, there's a different line range for everything. Like, you can see how ridiculously long this gets, right? Now, there's already a way of cutting off the rest of the paths, but you still have to specify the file name every time in there. The developers of Twig, Fabio and Potentier, actually made a patch to make this work, or tried to make this work, and we figured out together that this needs a little bit of more work for that kind of use case to be really useful, by not having to repeat the file name every time. Also, they want to do a mapping to the end of the file, and he used 999, sorry, 2 more 9s to make that work. Like, obviously, I hadn't thought about this use case, but what this could also be is things like end of file, right? So this kind of minor things I'm still adding. The original case where I wrote this for the people that map the class files to a different directory, they have a patch ready to go into the project, so that's good. I hope to see a little bit more happening here, both in PHP Storm, and on the Xdebug side to make this a little bit more convenient. What I think I will end up doing is, like, instead of all these line ranges, I will do what JavaScript source file do and take that approach. But I don't want these files to be JSON, because that means I have to re-implement a JSON parser, and life's too short for implementing JSON parsers. All right, the file paths. Let's ignore the. So turn the debugger off. Otherwise, I'm never going to go through anything. There we go. Right, demo, done that. Notify. So I mentioned that people still like doing var dumps sometimes, right? But sometimes the var dumps will blow up and mess up your layout. Not a problem with me, because my layouts are so simple and I don't know how to do designing stuff. But if you end up doing a var dump where you would render an attribute in HTML, then your whole layout goes messed up, right? So what Xdebug Notify allows you to do is do something like a var dump, but it sends the data over the debugging protocol. So you can still do the quick iteration if you don't want to set breakpoints, but still see the information in there. Let me make sure I stop PHP Storm. Stop there, turn this back on again here. Listen. No, I forgot, notify, that is the info file. Where did it go? My info file, I have this notify in here. I will turn off my exception, because we don't need more exceptions. I don't need this anymore. So basically I have nothing here on the screen. It doesn't do anything, right? It's like it only echoes finished. Otherwise I might be confused why nothing shows up on the screen. So I do this, I turn on this notify, save this, it's listening. What is those stars? Oh, I don't want to know what those stars are. Go back to my input page and I reload this, and, well, nothing happened. It's not, why is it showing the info? Did I leave that on? No. What's going on now? I just added this file, right? Oh, I know what's happening. It is running the file from before the path mapping. So it is running the info file that I wasn't trying to show you. So let me turn this back on again. Stop this, start this. Normally you don't mess around with this so much, obviously you only set this up once, but... So again, nothing happened, but there should have been info. Where did it go? I will turn on this just to for my sanity. It's just not running the right file. Oh, it helps if I type the right file, isn't it? There we go. That was silly. Anyway, where did the output go? Output. Okay. I will turn on Xdebug. I will actually do this one so that is a little bit less information here. It is listening. I will set breakpoints. They should work. Does this turn on? That is still turned on. I should not turn it on. I then need to change it. This is the problem when you change these things all the time, isn't it? There we go. It's listening. I load this. Okay, at least run the right file. But it didn't break. You can see that I'm not an IDE user. And I also, it did run this file.
Yeah, the deployment of the mapping system.
Oh, did I have that in there too? No, it's disabled.
Shouldn't you enable that here? Yeah.
Yes, I need to enable this one again. Save, run, listen. Reload. It should have gone through there. Okay, I'm baffled. There's probably good reason for it. What I would have expected to happen is that this Xdebug notify here, I give it a variable here, and it shows this variable here in this output plane. So you get to inspect just like you can normally when single stepping, look at these variables to see what's going on, which I think is a kind of a nice way of doing it, although I still prefer just to set a breakpoint really. All right, moving on, because my demos are clearly not going as I've done that. Return values, look at those. Okay, so the last thing I sort of want to look at is something I call control sockets. Now, let me think for a moment and turn the right things on and off to also show you this. So I have here, not here, that's my log file, which I might need in a moment. I have here in this file a, sorry, let me clear this. I have, yes, I have this ridiculously silly script. So what this is supposed to demonstrate is I have a long-running loop, my workers, and what is happening with them is that every time I obtain a task, it does something silly, like create a random number and show it to me, right? So when I run this, you can see, guess what's happening? It shows random numbers on the screen, which is lovely. Now, if my long-running script runs, how would I debug that? Because normally Xdebug only makes a connection to the IDE or tries to make one at the start of the script. But the script is already running, so how would I do that? Now for this I'm going to turn on PHP Storm again. Not PHP Storm, VS Code I mean. Turn off all these mappings. Stop this. I can also open this up. So I have the same file here. So normally what you can do is, of course, when you debug, you set a breakpoint right away. So I set a breakpoint here and I make it go listen. So when I now run this, let's try running info and see what's actually in here. Oh, it helps if I turn on the Xdebug info. So let's see, sorry, the escape things. But what is showing on here? It says there's a parse error in the path mapping file. That's fine, I don't care about that. And the debug is not active, meaning that we didn't start it. So how would I start the debugger from the command line? We do that by setting Xdebug mode. Xdebug mode equals debug, and you export the trigger. There's other ways of doing it, but this is how I like to do it. So I export these things. What the trigger is at the moment, it doesn't matter. You can also set up shared secrets, but I'm not doing that now. It just needs to be set. So when this run is now, well, I know it instantly started working because it's now waiting, blinking in my ID. So it stopped now in the first line of VS Code. The reason for that is because I hadn't triggered originally. So now this works. So this also means that the notify should also work when I step over this. But it didn't show anything. I don't know why not. Anyway, this works. What I wanted to do is the worker manager. So if I now go back here, I'm done with the script, I do the worker again. Okay, now instantly it stops the first line because I set a breakpoint in the ID, right? So I go there and it's stopped on this line. Now I get to inspect it as you would expect, but if I now continue, turn off the breakpoint and continue, now you'll see that the script continues to run with the numbers. But how do I now abort this? Normally Xdebug can only interrupt when there's a breakpoint, but you can only set breakpoints when it's paused. But the script is running, so you can't, or the ID can't set a breakpoint. So which means in the long run, a script, even though it runs in the debugger, you can't pause it anymore. And the only way how to fix that is literally killing the script and starting it again. Up until now. Since Xdebug 3.3, there is a way how to now do that. So I have a tool called Xdebug. If I type that with PS, what it should do is list all the Xdebug, all the PHP processes. Why it doesn't show that? It can't find any scripts. Is that because? So it's possible that I've turned it off. Why does it keep saying it's loaded twice? Oh, because it is, isn't it? There we go. Let me fix that first so you don't need it twice. Just try different PHP versions. It's loaded. It's an old version, but it will do. Try it again. There we go. I don't know. Maybe I had an old version there somewhere. So, sorry, misclicked. So it now tells me which PHP scripts are running, which is useful to see. Now, the way how this works is actually the PHP or Xdebug running in PHP, it has created a separate socket that it listens to once in a while to look for incoming commands. So this is an out-of-band debugging protocol. It's the same protocol, just out of the band of the normal protocol. And you can make it do things. At the moment, the only thing you can do with this is you can do PS to listen all the PHP processes, or you can do pause. Anyone wants to guess what pause does? Well, let me type it and see what happens. It says breakpoint signaled. You also see that the number stops scrolling because by issuing this command over this out-of-band socket protocol, it now immediately initiates a breakpoint. And it stopped on this line, and I can now just jump over it again and do whatever I want with it. Which is a very nice way, because now I can actually interrupt these programs, right? So let me continue again, obviously it's kind of annoying that I have to do this on a command line with another tool. It would be much nicer if the IDEs could also do that. Luckily, that is the case. At least the case for VS Code. Now, in order to do that, I need to figure out a way how to issue this command. So there's a way of doing that. You can do commands in here. So it says pause PHP process Xdebug debug. Okay, obviously you don't want to type this all the time. What you would do is you map a key binding to it, but to just show what it does. So if I run this now, fingers crossed, it should stop. It did not stop. Is that because there's no breakpoint? That's likely the case. So let me set a breakpoint. I'm not sure why it went away. Try this once more. Control socket. It does select PHP process, but it doesn't show any. I think what's happened here is that we recently changed the name of the control socket files, and I have a mismatch between what VS Code has and my own version. So what's supposed to happen is that it shows you either the process list, or if it's already connected, it should be able to stop directly. Now, obviously, this is still experimental, as you can see. I mean, I can't even get it to work right now. But the intention is that while it is running, let me make that work one more time. I will run it with pause. It pauses here. While it is running, oh no, where is this button? There, button. Turn this off. One more time. So this button turns into the pause button here. So although it's running now, I should be able to click pause and it should pause. That is the intention. It says pausing execution is not supported by Xdebug. That's clearly a lie. I'm not sure why it tells me that now. But that's the intention, is that you press the pause button and it then stops, and it will stop at the first line that's being executed. Now, I'm terribly sorry that all my demos were pretty rubbish. And sometimes it's kind of hard to set up debugging to begin with, right? Now, I have 5 minutes left, I think. 5 minutes. All right, so a few things that I want to work on now is beyond all the things that I just showing the experimental versions on to make sure that all work properly. And then the next big thing I want to look at is also using step debugging back in time. So normally when you set a breakpoint, you run, it stops at a breakpoint, and sometimes you then do step over and say, ah, crap, I wanted to step into this function. Happens to me all the time. With the time travel debugging, that is something that would be possible. So you'll be able to step back, or even scroll back and forwards through the whole execution of your script. Big feature, probably 2032. It's going to take ages. Just on the other side, not everybody realizes how Xdebug protocol actually works, the way how connections are being made. So in this case, I have Xdebug and PHP running on the same machine as my ID in port, address 51. PHP runs on port 80. Should be 443, but that makes debugging a little harder because you can't see what's going on. And the IDE is the location that listens for incoming debug connections coming from Xdebug. So the way how this usually works is like your IDE, or rather your browser, makes a connection, and then Xdebug makes a connection back to your IDE. That's the basic thing. Now, you can also do this from a browser. So if the browser makes a connection, Xdebug can see which IP address that came from, and then make the connection back to that same machine. For that, you get to set the IP address, for example, if you want to do that. So we set that as a variable. When a browser request comes in, Xdebug uses this IP information to make a connection to, which is really quite useful in case you have a slightly more complicated networking setup. Now, what happens if you have two clients? On the Xdebug side, you can only configure one IP address. So when you come normally, but there's another flag called discover client hosts that actually looks at this the information coming out from the HTTP request. So if it comes from browser 1, it sees, oh, it comes from address 51, and then makes a connection back. Similarly, if a request comes in from the other machine on the same network, it sees the information in the HTTP headers and then can make a connection to the server. So if you have on one network, one development machines with multiple developers, so to speak, then you can use this Discover client host. Kind of useful sometimes. Now, if this machine runs somewhere totally different, you can't really do that because the browser comes in with a connection, but the IP address can never connect back to your local network, for example, right? There's firewalls in the way or different networks. So what you traditionally would do is you would make an SSH connection, my red line, and this is SSH tunnel basically links the port 9003 where Xdebug and PHP runs on localhost and forwards that to this 9003 on this side. So which means then on the PHP Xdebug side, it can just make a connection to localhost port 9003 and then it gets forwarded over the SSH tunnel, right? So it makes a connection and then it connects to that end of the line to make a connection. But now what happens if you have more than one developer here? Because what you can't do is you can't make another SSH tunnel listening on the same port. You can't do that because you can only listen on one port at the same time. So this doesn't work. This is where Xdebug Cloud comes into play, which is a way of basically, what happens here is that the IDEs tells Xdebug Cloud, hi, I'm this name. So it knows where to forward connections to. So the browser makes a connection, and you saw that when I did on the command line, I use Xdebug trigger with a name. That is something called an IDE key. In this case, I've just used random names. They tend to be UUIDs, but it doesn't matter, it's too long to type. So when it comes into Xdebug, Xdebug sees this as, oh, this is an Xdebug Cloud thing, connects to Xdebug Cloud, this is a debugging request for Derick. And then Xdebug Cloud knows to which machine to forward to over the connection that the ID is already made. Similarly, and it can then forward that over that connection without the browser having to do these things again. Similarly, for the second user here, say, this is my connection. There's a connection for Ellie, the name for one of my elephants. I have many. Does that, so a debugging request comes in for Ellie, and then it can then forward that over that same connection. So in some networking setups, and this is the case where you have one development machine shared with often remote people working, remote developers, then this is also a way of debugging your connections. All right, that's sort of what I had to talk about. I can talk about supporting Xdebug. Praying to the debug gods is also a good way. I don't want to talk about it very much, but there's some lovely business supporters. If you are interested in that, come and have a talk to me. But I also like to show what I actually work on. So every month, I say every month, 10 out of 12. Let's be fair here. I basically produce a big list of all the things I've worked on, and I write a little newsletter that also goes to my blog, where I tell all the new features in Xdebug, what I've been working on, which interesting bugs I ran into sometimes, or special things, where special is undefined here. If I've made new videos showing some of the new features, when I've written some articles about some new features, and I publish this, and this gets to my blog every month-ish. All right. Do we have time for questions?
We do not have time for questions.
We do not have the time for questions. If you still have any questions, feel free to find me. I'll be around until later today. I'll be hanging around in the reception as well. Having said that, I hope the debugging wasn't too much of an issue for you. I know I'm going to get marked down for that, which is totally fair. Any further questions, come and have a talk to me. My slides are going to be online. They're not particularly useful because most of them said the word demo on it. Xdebug.org will have the list of all the things I've been worked on. If you have any further questions, come and find me. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I hope this was still useful. Cheers.